Hey, welcome back, and today we're going to be covering Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is about economic and restorative justice reparations. And reparations basically means repair, to repair harm, which gives me a segue into restorative justice. But first of all, let's start here. We need to begin the lecture today discussing community justice. And community justice is a philosophy that uses community stakeholders. They use these stakeholders to control and reduce crime and rebuild community relationships. It's through community policing, community courts, and restorative justice that we achieve community justice. And let me just further explain, which is outside the realm of your chapter, the concept of the social contract. And the social contract is basically what runs the criminal justice system. What I mean by social contract is as follows. By the sheer fact that you were born a citizen of the United States of America, you entered into a social contract. So what that means is we agree as citizens to abide by the laws. And because we abide by the laws, we are afforded certain protections from the criminal justice system. So if we violate the law, then it's up to society to intervene with our behavior. So it's like this. Here's a practical example. If you've ever been to court or seen any kind of court proceedings, you'll hear that it's not Heidi Samuels versus Jane Snyder. It's the state of West Virginia versus Heidi Samuels, or the District Court of Maryland versus Heidi Samuels, or the Circuit Court of West Virginia versus Heidi Samuels. And that's how that works, because when people commit a crime, they commit a crime against all society, thus the social contract. All right, so let's look at restorative justice. Restorative justice is a sentencing philosophy that emphasizes that the offender take responsibility for their actions, and they try to get the offender to repair the harm that they've done to the community and the victim. And here's an easy way that I like to look at restorative justice, and it's a program that makes the victim whole again. Make the victim whole again. Restorative justice. See, restorative justice focuses on the victim, not the offender. In your typical criminal justice programs, we tend to focus on the criminal. Like, how are we going to punish the criminal? Where are we going to sentence the criminal to? How long are we going to sentence the criminal? That sort of thing. So let me give you some principles regarding the restorative justice programs. So it's community-based, and it combines mainstream American criminal justice with indigenous justice practices by Native Americans. And not just Native Americans, but something beyond your book is that your book doesn't talk about is how we have incorporated the Aboriginal practices into these restorative justice programs. Like when we talk about the talking stick, and that's an example of a restorative program wherein people sit around. I'm sure you've seen it on sitcoms because people like to make fun of it. But it's a good way to communicate. It's where one person holds the stick, gets to talk. The other person doesn't get to talk until that person's done. So I don't know about you, but sometimes I get overzealous about things in a conversation or a dialogue about something I feel very strongly about, and I tend to want to interrupt people. So this is a good way that's a good program to show respect for each other. So restorative justice principles, they focus on the victim, the offender, and the community rather than just punishing the offender. They use reintegrative shaming rather than stigmatization. And we talked a little bit about stigma of offenders. And the stigma means that it's an idea that people have about somebody just because they've been in prison. For example, if say you had a neighbor that was arrested for murder, or I'm sorry, use this one. Say you have a neighbor that was arrested for child molestation. What would be your first thought? I'll bet you would think your neighbor did it. And I bet you'd probably have a predisposed idea to keep your kids away from that person, just to be on the safe side. So that's a stigma that is attached to a particular crime. Now with reintegrative shaming, it's a little bit different. For example, offender notification laws are a way to keep society safe, but it also shames the offender into not doing that crime anymore. So reintegrative shaming allows the victim and the community to disapprove of the criminal behavior, but seeks to repair that weakened bond between society and the crime. So there are 6 commonalities shared by all restorative justice programs. Here they are. So you have to have at least one session held in the community with the goal, here's the goal, of allowing the victims to communicate how the crime affected them. Secondly, you have to have a reparative plan that is developed and accepted by the victim and the offender. Thirdly, excuse me, the victim and offenders volunteer to participate. And fourth, parties rely on community partners and volunteers to help them. Next, offenders accept responsibility for their crime and their guilt and agree to comply with anything that the program comes up with. And so while restorative justice programs can take place in jails and prisons, most commonly these are done in the community and used as an alternative to your traditional based court programs. Here's the specific type of restorative justice program. Victim Offender Mediation, VOM for short. So we've had this going on in the United States since about the early 1980s. So there are really thousands of programs worldwide. And here's how it works. The victims agree to participate in order to seek restitution, maybe seek punishment, and share their grief with the offender. Victim Offender Mediation. I have a great video that I show usually in my traditional classes. And you'd be surprised how well this program works. In the video that features 3 people that are survivors, somebody in their family had been murdered. And you'd be surprised, you'd think these people would want, have a vendetta or want retaliation or so on. But really what they really want to do is get some closure. They want to be able to express their pain, their grief, and tell that offender how their behavior, their actions, their crime, if you will, actually impacted their life. And yeah, it dredges up a lot of feelings, and certainly this is a program that's not meant for everybody, especially victims of sexual assault. So the victims really report satisfaction with the case outcome because if we're not dealing with something as heinous as murder, if they're just looking for restitution or something like that, then a lot of times they get their restitution. Funny thing is, though, 40 to 60% of victims actually refuse to participate in any kind of victim offender mediation. Another type of program is reparation boards, and they've existed in juvenile justice since about 1920. So it's a board consisting of various people from the community who get together and basically decide what they're going to do with the case. Next, we have victim impact panels. And this is like 1 or more confrontational meetings that occur post-conviction between willing offenders and those whose lives have been affected. It doesn't just have to be the particular victim, it can be the surrounding community. And it's not necessarily the exact same victims of the offender. So it's not meant to condemn or shame the offender, but it's help them make better decisions in the future. Another one, and some people find this really odd, is called sentencing circles. And this is where the indigenous factor comes in. So these are circles, they're based on tribal justice, and they rely on reintegrative shaming. The circle consists of the following people. You've got the offender, you got the victim, you got the family, you got friends, you could have co-workers, social service people, and any kind of interested community members. And the purpose is to come up with a consensus about how to achieve justice. So of all the restorative justice programs, the circle is has the largest number of participants. And that's a wrap for Chapter 10. Thanks for listening.